My wife's friend DM'd me, "She's been cheating while you visit your sick mother." But when I confronted my wife, she laughed and showed me her phone with messages from the same friend trying to seduce her for months. We decided to set up a dinner where I pretended to be out of town, and when the friend showed up with wine and lingerie, my wife and I were both waiting with her husband, who we'd called an hour earlier. The text came through while I was sitting in my mother's hospital room, watching her sleep after another round of chemotherapy. I stared at the message from Jessica Hartley, my wife Elena's closest friend since college, feeling my stomach drop. My hands shook as I read it 3 more times. The fluorescent hospital lights suddenly too bright, the antiseptic smell overwhelming. I drove home that night in silence, my mother's frail hand waving goodbye replaying in my mind alongside Jessica's words. When I walked through our front door at midnight, Elena was curled up on the couch with her laptop, wearing my old college sweatshirt. She looked up with tired eyes and a soft smile that made my chest ache. "How's your mom?" I was waiting up. I pulled out my phone without a word and showed her Jessica's message. The smile died on her face, replaced by something I'd never seen before. Pure, cold rage. "That manipulative bitch," Elena whispered, then did something unexpected. She grabbed her own phone and thrust it at me. "Read." I scrolled through months of messages from Jessica, sultry photos sent late at night, suggestions to talk about your marriage problems, invitations for drinks when Jessica knew I'd be at the hospital. Elena had screenshotted everything. "She's been trying to seduce me since your mom got diagnosed. I was collecting evidence before I told you because I knew you wouldn't believe how sick she really is. My wife wasn't the one who'd betrayed me. Jessica had been orchestrating something far worse, and looking at Elena's exhausted face, I realized she'd been carrying this burden alone while I was 300 miles away. The friend we'd trusted in our home, at our dinner table, around our lives, she'd been hunting." Elena sat cross-legged on the floor, spreading printed screenshots across our coffee table like evidence at a crime scene. "Look at the timestamps," she said, her voice steady but her jaw tight. "Every message comes within an hour of you texting me that you'd arrived at the hospital. She was tracking your location through our shared calendar." I picked up one screenshot, dated 3 weeks ago. Jessica had sent a photo of herself in a black dress, with the caption, "Feeling lonely tonight. David's working late again. Want company?" Below it, Elena had responded with a polite deflection. The next message from Jessica was more direct. "You deserve someone who's actually here for you. She tried to kiss me," Elena said quietly, 2 weeks ago when she came over with that casserole. Said you were emotionally abandoning me and that she'd always felt a connection between us." My wife's hands clenched. I pushed her away and told her to leave, but she just laughed and said I'd come around eventually. Said most women do once they realize their options. I felt something cold settle in my chest. "David doesn't know?" "David thinks Jessica works late at the gym 3 nights a week." Elena pulled up another screenshot, Jessica's location services showing her parked outside our house on nights I was gone, sometimes for hours. "I think she's done this before. There are reviews on her personal training business page from women accusing her of inappropriate behavior with their husbands, but they're buried under fake 5-star reviews." We sat in silence for a moment. Then Elena looked up at me with an expression I recognized from when she'd negotiated her last promotion, calculated and utterly merciless. "I want to destroy her, Marcus. Not just expose her. I want her to lose everything the way she tried to take everything from us." The plan formed over 3 days of careful research. Elena discovered David Hartley was up for partner at his law firm, a conservative family values company where image was everything. Jessica's Instagram portrayed the perfect marriage: couples workouts, romantic date nights, testimonials about their unbreakable bond. It was all performance. "She's hosting that charity dinner next Friday," Elena said, checking Jessica's public event page, "the one for her training business. David's senior partners are attending." She looked at me with a sharp smile. "You're supposed to be visiting your mom that weekend." I called my mother that evening. Her voice was stronger after the latest treatment. "I'm doing better, sweetheart. You don't need to come this weekend. Aunt Marie is here." When I explained what Elena and I were planning, my mother was quiet for a long moment. Then she laughed, really laughed, for the first time in months. "That woman brought me grocery store flowers at the hospital and spent the whole visit asking about your marriage. I knew something was wrong. Do what you need to do, Marcus. Some people need to learn they can't take what isn't theirs." Elena made the call to Jessica on Wednesday, her voice perfectly strained. Marcus extended his trip. His mom had a setback. I'm so tired of being alone. The pause on the other end was pregnant with satisfaction. Why don't you come over Friday night? Elena continued. Bring that wine you mentioned. I think I'm ready to talk about what you said. Jessica's response was instant. I'll be there at 8. And Elena, you won't regret this. Friday afternoon, I posted on social media from my mother's town. A photo she'd sent me of her garden, carefully geotagged. Jessica liked it within minutes. At 6 p.m., Elena texted Jessica, David's working late again? The response came back with a winky face. He's always working late. What Jessica didn't know was that David was sitting in our guest bedroom, staring at his wife's text messages on Elena's laptop. We'd called him at noon, and he'd driven straight from his office, his face growing grayer with each screenshot Elena showed him. How long? He'd asked quietly. Elena's answer was devastating. At least 18 months. Maybe longer. At 7:30, Elena set the scene. Dim lighting in the living room, 2 wine glasses on the coffee table, soft music playing. She'd changed into jeans and a casual top, nothing suggestive, but Jessica wouldn't care about details. David and I waited in the darkened kitchen, watching the front door through the gap. Jessica arrived at 8 p.m. exactly, carrying expensive wine and a designer bag that clearly wasn't just for wine. Through the window, we watched her check her reflection, adjust her low-cut blouse, and practice a sympathetic expression before ringing the doorbell. Elena opened the door with a tired smile. You came. Of course I came, Jessica purred, stepping inside. I've been waiting for you to... I flipped on the kitchen lights. David stepped into the living room doorway. Jessica's face went from predatory confidence to complete horror in less than a second. The wine bottle slipped from her hand and shattered on our hardwood floor, spreading red across the boards like a stain that wouldn't wash out. Hello, Jessica, I said quietly. David's voice was hollow. Show me the bag. Jessica's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. David, I can explain. This isn't what it looks like. Open the bag. David's voice was flat, emotionless in a way that made the temperature in the room drop 10 degrees. He was a litigation attorney, and right now he sounded exactly like the man who'd made junior partners cry in depositions. Elena walked over and picked up the designer bag from where Jessica had dropped it. She upended it onto our coffee table. Lingerie tumbled out. Black lace, still tagged. A bottle of massage oil. Condoms. A card in an unsealed envelope. Elena opened it and read aloud, To the woman who sees me for who I really am. Tonight is just the beginning of us. She looked up at Jessica. You signed it, your future. You set me up, Jessica breathed, her face flushing red. This is entrapment. Entrapment requires law enforcement, David said coldly. I'm a lawyer, Jessica. I know exactly what this is. It's evidence. He held up his phone, and I realized he'd been recording since the moment Jessica walked in. Evidence of an attempted affair. Evidence I'll need when I file for divorce on Monday. Jessica lunged toward him, suddenly desperate. Baby. No. She invited me here. Elena's been coming on to me for weeks. She spun toward Elena, her desperation morphing into viciousness. Tell him. Tell him how you've been texting me, how you said you wanted to experiment. Elena held up her phone, turning it so everyone could see the screen recording she'd been making. You mean these text messages, where I respond to your advances with rejection? Where I tell you I love my husband? Where you tell me I'll change my mind eventually? She swiped to another screen. Or should we discuss the 17 times you parked outside our house between midnight and 2 a.m.? I have security camera footage. Time-stamped. I watched Jessica's face cycle through expressions. Shock, rage, calculation, and finally a desperate cunning. You're both pathetic, she hissed, backing toward the door. David, they manipulated you. They're trying to destroy our marriage because they're falling apart. Your location services show you were at a hotel with someone named Brandon, trainer, every Thursday for the last 6 months, David said, consulting his phone with eerie calm. I pulled our credit card statements during my drive over here. You've been charging rooms to our account and listing them as business expenses. The gym you claim doesn't exist at that address. It's a residential building. Jessica went white. You went through my phone? You left it unlocked on the kitchen counter last week. I enabled cloud backup to my laptop. David's smile was knife-thin. I'm a digital forensics specialist for corporate litigation, Jessica. Did you really think I wouldn't find out eventually? The only question was when. He turned to Elena and me. Thank you for tonight. This confirms the timeline I needed. Her affair started before our 5th anniversary, which means the prenuptial agreement's infidelity clause is ironclad. What prenuptial agreement? Jessica's voice cracked. Your parents didn't make us. My parents insisted, and you signed it at the courthouse. Drunk, if I remember correctly, giggling about how romantic it was that I didn't care about protecting my assets. David's expression was carved from ice. Any infidelity on your part means you leave the marriage with exactly what you brought into it, which, if memory serves, was $38,000 in credit card debt and a leased BMW you couldn't afford. Jessica grabbed for his arm. David stepped back smoothly, holding up his phone like a shield. Don't touch me. I'm still recording. The house is in my name, purchased before the marriage with my inheritance. My training business is registered as an LLC under both our names, making it marital property subject to division. However, given that the business has been operating at a loss for 3 years while you siphon money into a personal account, yes, I found that too, I think a judge will be very interested in examining the books. Jessica looked around wildly, like an animal in a trap. Her eyes landed on me. Marcus, you know what it's like to be married to someone who doesn't see you. Elena's been cold to me for months because you tried to assault her, I said quietly. That's called attempted sexual assault, Jessica. Elena has documentation of every unwanted advance, every boundary you crossed, every time she said no and you persisted. We haven't decided yet if we're filing a police report, but that's still on the table. The blood drained from Jessica's face entirely. You wouldn't. Elena stepped forward, and I saw the woman I'd fallen in love with in college. Brilliant, strategic, and absolutely done with other people's games. You targeted me because you thought I was vulnerable. Alone. Easy prey while my husband cared for his dying mother. Her voice was surgical. You miscalculated. See, while you were busy tracking Marcus's location and planning your seduction, I was documenting everything. Every text. Every call. Every time you showed up uninvited. Every lie you told about your whereabouts. She pulled out a folder from the end table drawer. She'd prepared this in advance and handed it to David. That's the contact information for 3 other women in your gym who've complained about Jessica's behavior with their spouses. They wouldn't talk to me officially, but they might talk to a lawyer, especially now. David flipped through the pages, his expression growing darker. You've been doing this for years. Also in that folder, Elena continued, are screenshots from Jessica's Finsta account, the private Instagram she uses to brag to her actual friends. There are posts about conquering married women, keeping account, rating them on difficulty. She paused, letting that sink in. You're not even attracted to me, are you, Jessica? This was just a game. Another trophy to collect. Jessica's face twisted. You smug bitch. You think you're so special? So untouchable? Marcus was never there for you. I was at the hospital with my mother who has stage 3 cancer. I cut in, my voice hard. Where exactly should I have been? Here. Suspicious of my wife because her predatory friend was gaslighting me through text messages? You thought you could break us apart, Elena said softly. Use his absence and my loneliness to create a wedge. Then what? Comfort him after you'd stolen me? Play the concerned friend who just wanted us both to be happy? She shook her head. You wanted to destroy our marriage to prove you could. And when I rejected you, you got desperate enough to try to convince Marcus I was the cheater instead. Jessica's last shred of composure snapped. She grabbed a framed photo from our mantel, our wedding picture, and hurled it at the wall. Glass exploded across the floor. You're both going to regret this. I have friends, connections. David, your partners play golf with my father. Your father who hasn't spoken to you in 6 years? David asked mildly. Yes, I called him this afternoon. Had a very illuminating conversation about your history of inappropriate attachments that got you expelled from your sorority. He asked me to send his apologies for not warning me before the wedding. He pocketed his phone. I'm leaving now. My lawyer will contact you Monday morning. You have until Sunday night to remove your personal belongings from the house. Anything left behind will be donated. Where am I supposed to go? Jessica screamed. I genuinely don't care, David said, and walked past her toward our front door. He paused, turning back to Elena and me. Thank you. Truly. If you ever need a legal favor, you call me directly. Then he was gone, the door clicking shut with finality. Jessica stood in the wreckage of her own making. Broken glass, spilled wine, scattered lingerie, and I saw the moment she realized she'd lost everything. Her husband, her home, her reputation, the carefully constructed image of her perfect life was shattered as thoroughly as the wine bottle on our floor. "I could ruin you both," she whispered, but there was no conviction behind it. Elena's smile was pitying. "With what? The truth? By all means, try. Tell people how you spent months sexually harassing a married woman while her husband cared for his dying mother. Tell them about your secret hookups and your trophy-hunting Instagram. Tell them how you tried to frame me as a cheater when I rejected your advances." She opened our front door. "Go ahead, Jessica. I'm an HR director for a Fortune 500 company. I've ended careers for less. Who do you think people will believe?" Jessica grabbed her purse, leaving the lingerie and wine staining our floor, and stumbled toward the door. At the threshold, she turned back one last time, mascara running down her face. "You're making a mistake. Both of you. I could have given you everything. You could have given us nothing," I said quietly, "because you have nothing real to give. You're just someone who takes." After she left, Elena and I stood in the silence of our living room, surrounded by the physical evidence of Jessica's destruction. Then my wife started laughing, a slightly hysterical sound that turned into genuine mirth. "Did you see her face when David started listing her affair timeline?" I pulled Elena into my arms, feeling the tension drain from both of us. "You were terrifying. Remind me never to cross you." "You're safe," she murmured against my chest. "You stayed with your mother. You showed me what commitment looks like. Jessica never stood a chance." But we both knew this wasn't over. Not yet. The email arrived Monday morning while Elena was getting ready for work. I was making coffee when she called me into the bedroom, her phone screen illuminating her face with a cold glow. "Look." Jessica had sent a mass email to 15 people, our mutual friends, Elena's coworkers, members of our gym. The subject line read, "The truth about Elena Fitzgerald." My stomach clenched as I read her version of events. Elena had seduced her during a vulnerable moment, initiated months of an emotional affair, then panicked and invented evidence when Jessica tried to end it. She painted herself as the victim of a coordinated attack by a manipulative couple trying to destroy her marriage to cover up Elena's infidelity. "She attached edited screenshots," Elena said, her voice dangerously quiet. "She cut out her advances and made it look like I initiated everything." Her hand trembled slightly. "3 of my coworkers have already emailed asking to hear my side. My VP wants a meeting this afternoon." I felt rage bloom hot in my chest. "She's trying to destroy your career. She's desperate." Elena set down her phone and started getting dressed with sharp, precise movements. "Cornered animals lash out. David probably served her with papers this morning." She checked her watch. "I need to get to the office early and brief legal before anyone else reads their email." The next text came from my brother. "Dude, WTF is this email about Elena? Call me." Then my mother's sister. "Marcus, honey, I received something concerning about your wife." By noon, my phone had 17 messages. Jessica had gone scorched earth, trying to poison every relationship we had before her own reputation completely collapsed. It was a desperate gambler's move. If she was going down, she'd drag us with her. But she'd made a critical mistake. At 2 p.m., Elena sent her own email to the same list. The subject line was simple. The truth about Elena Fitzgerald, with evidence. She attached the original unedited screenshots showing Jessica's months of harassment. The security camera footage of Jessica parked outside our house at midnight. The text where Jessica admitted she'd been patient, but your husband is never home. And crucially, the video recording from Friday night showing Jessica arriving with lingerie and massage oil. Then Elena attached one more document, a cease and desist letter from David Hartley's law firm, informing Jessica that any further defamatory statements would result in immediate legal action. "Your move," Elena muttered, hitting send. The response was instantaneous. Within an hour, 2 of Elena's co-workers had replied with apologies. By 4 p.m., someone had created a group chat without Jessica, where our friends were sharing their own uncomfortable Jessica stories. Times she'd been too flirty with their husbands, made inappropriate comments, pushed boundaries at parties. The tide had turned. But Jessica wasn't done. Tuesday morning, I went for my usual run through our neighborhood. When I returned, someone had spray-painted "Home Wrecker" across our garage door in dripping red letters. Our mailbox had been smashed, mail scattered across the lawn. Every window on Elena's car had been shattered, the seats slashed open, white stuffing blooming like wounds. I called the police while documenting everything on my phone. Elena emerged from the house in her running clothes, having skipped her morning workout to work from home. She stared at her destroyed car with eerie calm. She's escalating. The police officer taking our report was a tired-looking woman in her 40s who'd clearly seen worse. Any idea who might have done this? Elena handed her a printed timeline of Jessica's harassment, the Friday night incident, and the email campaign. We have a restraining order hearing scheduled for Thursday. This is the woman we're filing against. The officer's expression shifted from routine to interested. Does she know where you live? She's been here dozens of times as our guest, I said. She knows our schedules, our routines, everything. The officer made detailed notes. I'll add this to the report. Save all communication from her. Don't respond, don't engage. Let us handle it from here. She glanced at the graffiti. That paint's fresh. Probably happened between 4 and 6 a.m. Do you have security cameras? We did. 3 of them, installed after Jessica's midnight parking incidents. Elena pulled up the footage on her phone, and we watched a figure in dark clothes and a hood approach our property at 4:47 a.m. The camera caught them spray painting the garage, attacking the mailbox with a baseball bat, then methodically destroying Elena's car. When they turned toward the streetlight, the hood slipped for just a moment. Jessica's face was clearly visible, twisted with rage. That's solid evidence, the officer said, photographing the screen. I'm going to make some calls. Vandalism, destruction of property, possibly stalking charges given the documented history. She looked at us seriously. Be careful. She's showing signs of obsessive behavior. People like this don't stop until they're forced to. After she left, Elena and I sat on our front steps surrounded by the wreckage of our property. This is going to get worse before it gets better, Elena said quietly. She was right. Wednesday, Jessica showed up at Elena's office building. Security stopped her in the lobby when she tried to go up to Elena's floor, screaming about being denied access to tell the truth. They called the police. Jessica was escorted out, still shouting threats loud enough that someone recorded it on their phone. The video was circulating on local social media by lunchtime. Crazy woman removed from downtown office building. The comments were brutal. Someone had identified Jessica and linked her business page. Former clients started posting their own stories. Sessions where Jessica got too personal, asked invasive questions about marriages, made uncomfortable comments about bodies and relationships. The 5-star reviews began disappearing, replaced by 1-star warnings. Her professional reputation was collapsing in real time. Thursday morning, we arrived at the courthouse for the restraining order hearing. David was already there with his lawyer, filing his own protective order. Jessica showed up 15 minutes late, disheveled and wild-eyed, representing herself because apparently no lawyer would take her case on 24 hours' notice. The judge was a silver-haired woman who reviewed our evidence with increasing disapproval. The screenshots, the security footage, the police reports about the vandalism, Elena's testimony about the attempted assault, David's testimony about discovering the affair, and Jessica's subsequent harassment campaign. When Jessica tried to speak, claiming Elena had manipulated her, the judge held up one hand. Ms. Hartley, I've reviewed the evidence. The documented timeline shows a clear pattern of predatory behavior on your part, escalating to stalking and property destruction when your advances were rejected. The video evidence from Friday night is particularly damaging to your claims. They set me up. You arrived at their home with lingerie and intimate supplies after months of documented sexual harassment. That's not a setup, Ms. Hartley. That's evidence of intent. The judge signed both restraining orders without hesitation. You are ordered to stay at least 500 feet away from Ms. and Mr. Fitzgerald, their home, and Ms. Fitzgerald's workplace. You are also ordered to stay 500 feet from Mr. David Hartley. Any violation will result in immediate arrest. Do you understand? Jessica's face crumpled. I have nowhere to go. My husband locked me out. That's not this court's concern. Your marital issues are separate. The judge's expression softened slightly, but her voice remained firm. Ms. Hartley, I strongly suggest you seek counseling and legal representation for your divorce. This behavior pattern needs to stop before you face criminal charges. As we left the courthouse, I saw Jessica sitting alone on a bench outside, staring at nothing. Her designer bag was gone, replaced with a worn backpack. Her hair was unwashed. The confident predator who'd walked into our house 5 days ago had been replaced by something hollow and broken. "She's going to try something else," Elena murmured as we walked to our car. "This isn't over." But for the first time, I believed we could handle whatever came next, because Jessica had underestimated the most important thing. Elena and I weren't just united against her. We'd been united all along. That's what she'd never understood. You can't break something that's already whole. Still, Elena was right. Jessica had one more move to make, and it came that night. The call came at 11 p.m. David's name flashed on my phone, and I knew immediately something had gone very wrong. "She burned down the gym," he said without preamble. "Or tried to. The sprinkler system caught it before it spread, but there's security footage of her pouring gasoline in the locker room and lighting it with a road flare. The police are looking for her now." Elena was already sitting up in bed, reading the emergency alerts on her phone. "There's a bolo out for her vehicle. Marcus, she's completely snapped." The next 3 hours were a blur of phone calls with police, checking our security cameras obsessively and sitting in our living room with every light on. At 2 a.m., Elena's phone buzzed with an unknown number. She put it on speaker. "You took everything from me." Jessica's voice was slurred, thick with alcohol or exhaustion. "My marriage, my business, my reputation, my home. You took those things from yourself," Elena said calmly, though I could see her hand shaking. "We just documented your actions." "I was trying to save you," Jessica screamed. "He's never there, Elena. I was showing you what it's like to be wanted, to be chosen. By assaulting me, by stalking me, by trying to destroy my marriage." Elena's voice turned cold. "You weren't saving me, Jessica. You were hunting me. There's a difference. I loved you." "No, you didn't. You wanted to win. I was a challenge, a game, another entry in your private Instagram trophy collection." Elena leaned toward the phone. "Where are you right now, Jessica?" Silence. Then, "Somewhere you'll never find me. Somewhere I can finally think." A bitter laugh. "David's frozen all the accounts. I have $600 and a car with an empty tank. But you know what? I'm going to tell everyone what you really are. I have friends in media. I have connections." "You had connections," Elena interrupted. "Past tense. I work in HR, remember? I know how to track professional networks. I've spent the last 3 days quietly reaching out to people you claimed as friends and connections. Turns out most of them already knew what you were. They just didn't have proof before." She paused. "The reporter from Channel 7 you thought would help you? Her sister-in-law was one of your targets 3 years ago. She'd love to interview you, though. Put your face on the news alongside footage of you committing arson. The sound on the other end might have been a sob or a laugh. You're a monster!" "No, Jessica. I'm just someone who protects what's mine." Elena's voice softened with false sympathy. "You made a mistake. You thought I was weak because I was lonely. You thought Marcus was weak because he prioritized his dying mother. You thought you could exploit pain and loneliness like they were entry points instead of what they actually are. Proof of love and commitment. Fuck you. The police are tracing this call," I cut in. It was a bluff, but Jessica was too far gone to think clearly. "Every second you stay on the line, they get closer to finding you." The call ended abruptly. Elena immediately called the detective handling our case and reported the threat. She mentioned hiding somewhere she can think. "Does she have any property outside the city?" Within 30 minutes, police had checked Jessica's family cabin 2 hours north. They found her car in the driveway, engine still warm. Jessica was inside, surrounded by printed photos of Elena, some from social media, others clearly taken without permission. She'd been building some kind of shrine or evidence board, red string connecting images with manic intensity. She didn't resist arrest. According to the detective who called us at dawn, she just sat there repeating, "They took everything. I had a plan. It was all supposed to work." The charges came fast. Arson, stalking, harassment, destruction of property, attempted breaking and entering. She'd tried to jimmy open our back door 2 nights ago, caught on camera. David's lawyer added a civil suit for emotional distress and defamation. Elena's company added their own legal action for the disruption caused by Jessica's office building incident, but the final blow came from an unexpected source. Friday afternoon, Brandon, the trainer Jessica had been having an actual affair with, posted a detailed statement on social media. He was 24, naive, and hadn't realized Jessica was married until David's lawyer contacted him as part of discovery. His post explained how Jessica had lied about being divorced, manipulated him into the affair, and used him as an alibi while she stalked an obsession she refused to name. He included screenshots of Jessica's messages where she detailed her plan to break up a marriage and show them both what real desire looks like. The post went viral in our social circle, then local news picked it up. Then a true crime podcast reached out asking for interviews. Jessica Hartley became a cautionary tale almost overnight. The personal trainer who stalked a client's wife, destroyed her own marriage, and spiraled into arson and obsession. Her mugshot circulated with headlines like "Fatal Attraction Copycat" and "Local Woman's Obsession Turns Criminal." David's divorce was finalized within 6 weeks on grounds of infidelity and mental cruelty. The prenup meant Jessica got nothing. No house, no shared business assets, no alimony. Her training business dissolved when the gym revoked her rental agreement due to the arson. Her professional certifications were suspended pending investigation. The criminal trial took 4 months. Jessica pleaded guilty to avoid prison time, accepting 2 years probation, mandatory psychiatric treatment, and a permanent restraining order against us and David. The judge's final words were harsh. "You systematically attempted to destroy multiple lives because you felt entitled to someone else's spouse. You are fortunate that no one was physically harmed during your arson attempt, or you'd be facing a decade behind bars." Elena and I attended the sentencing. We sat in the back of the courtroom and watched Jessica, thin, hollow-eyed, wearing an ill-fitting suit probably borrowed from a public defender's office, accept her punishment without argument. When the bailiff let her out, she glanced back once. Not at us, at the floor, like she couldn't even meet our eyes anymore. "It's over," Elena whispered, taking my hand. But it wasn't. Not quite. Because 2 weeks after the sentencing, we received a letter from Jessica's court-appointed therapist. It wasn't meant for us. It was misfiled, accidentally sent to our address instead of the probation office. Elena opened it before realizing what it was. The letter detailed Jessica's diagnosis: borderline personality disorder, with obsessive features, likely undiagnosed for years. It explained her pattern of targeting individuals she perceived as unavailable or challenging, viewing romantic conquest as validation of self-worth. It noted her complete inability to process rejection and her tendency to reframe her predatory behavior as victimhood. The therapist's final assessment was chilling. Subject shows limited insight into her actions and their impact on others. Prognosis for behavioral change is guarded. Recommend intensive long-term treatment and careful monitoring of future relationships. Elena read it twice, then quietly shredded it. "We're forwarding this to her probation officer and never thinking about it again. She's someone else's problem now," I agreed. That weekend, we repainted the garage, replaced Elena's car, and installed new flowers in the front yard where the mailbox had been destroyed. We were erasing the physical evidence of Jessica's destruction, reclaiming our home and our peace. Sunday evening, my mother called. Her voice was stronger than it had been in months. "The latest scans are clean," she said, and I heard tears in her voice. "The doctor says I'm in remission." I looked at Elena, who was curled up on our couch reading a book, safe and whole and mine. "Mom, that's incredible. I'm coming to visit next weekend." "Bring Elena," my mother said firmly. "I want to thank her properly for protecting my son while I couldn't." After we hung up, I told Elena about the remission. She smiled, a real, unguarded smile, and said, "Good. We should all get a happy ending after this nightmare." "We already did," I said, pulling her close. The moment Jessica walked out our door for the last time. Because in the end, Jessica hadn't taken anything from us. She'd tried. God, she'd tried with everything she had. But she'd miscalculated the strength of what Elena and I had built together. She'd thought loneliness was weakness. She'd thought absence meant abandonment. She'd thought she could exploit vulnerability like it was an open door. Instead, she'd found 2 people who understood that love isn't about proximity. It's about choice. And every day, through my mother's illness and Jessica's stalking and the destruction she rained down on our lives, Elena and I had chosen each other. Jessica had bet everything on breaking us apart. She lost. 6 months later, I was grilling burgers in our backyard when Elena came out with her phone, a strange expression on her face. "You need to see this." It was a Facebook post from one of our old gym friends. A photo showed the grand opening of a new training studio downtown. Sleek, modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows. The owner, beaming in the center of the photo with a cutting ribbon, was David Hartley. "He bought Jessica's old business location," Elena read from the caption. Renovated it completely. The article says he's donating all first-year profits to a domestic violence and stalking awareness foundation. She scrolled down. And he's engaged. To his college sweetheart who he reconnected with after the divorce. I felt a satisfied warmth that had nothing to do with the grill. Good for him. We should send flowers, Elena said, already typing a message. My mother was visiting that weekend. Her first trip to our place since the remission. Healthy enough to travel without assistance. She was in our living room, doing a crossword puzzle, and looking more like her old self than she had in over a year. When I told her about David's new beginning, she smiled. That's what happens when you cut out the rot, she said. Everything else can finally grow. Elena had been promoted 3 months ago, her VP personally commending her for how she'd handled the difficult personal situation with professionalism and integrity. The irony wasn't lost on us. Jessica had tried to destroy Elena's career and instead had inadvertently proven her crisis management skills. As for Jessica herself, we heard updates occasionally through the social grapevine. She'd moved 2 states away after her probation ended, working retail and living in a studio apartment. Her social media was gone, deleted or made private. The last anyone had seen her, she was alone, disconnected. A cautionary tale that people whispered about at parties. Remember that crazy trainer who stalked the Fitzgeralds? Oh my God, yes. Wasn't she on the news? I heard she tried to burn down a gym. Some people just can't handle rejection. Her name had become synonymous with obsession and self-destruction. The professional network she'd worked years to build had evaporated. The reputation she'd curated so carefully was permanently destroyed. She'd gambled everything on breaking up our marriage, and instead had obliterated her own life. Meanwhile, Elena and I were planning a 20th anniversary vow renewal, still years away, but we liked having something to look forward to. My mother's cancer remained in remission. Our home bore no scars from Jessica's vandalism. We'd made sure of that. Even the security camera footage had been archived and locked away, evidence we'd never need to see again. One evening, as we sat on our back porch watching the sunset, Elena said quietly, "Do you ever think about her?" "Sometimes," I admitted, wondering if she ever understood what she did wrong. "She didn't," Elena said with certainty. "The therapist's letter said it. People like Jessica don't see their victims as real people with real lives. We were just obstacles in the way of what she wanted. When we didn't break, when we fought back, she couldn't process it. Do you think she's changed?" Elena was quiet for a long moment. "No. I think she's just more careful now about who she targets." She turned to look at me. "But that's not our problem anymore. She made her choices. She faces her consequences. We get to move on." And we had. God, we had. The final piece of closure came unexpectedly. A year after the trial, we received a formal letter from the court system. Jessica had violated her probation by attempting to contact David through a fake social media profile. She'd been sentenced to 6 months in county jail, followed by an extended probation period with stricter monitoring. She couldn't help herself, Elena said, reading the letter. She saw David happy and successful, and she had to try to insert herself back into his life. Some people never learn, I agreed. We filed the letter away with all the other evidence, then went back to our lives. Because that's what Jessica had never understood. Our lives weren't about her. They never had been. She'd been a disruption, a crisis, a problem we solved together. And once solved, she became irrelevant. I thought about the night she'd shown up at our door with wine and lingerie, so certain of her victory. How she'd looked when she realized Elena and I had orchestrated the entire trap. How David had methodically dismantled every aspect of her carefully constructed lies. How she'd screamed and broken things and threatened us, thinking she still had power. She'd lost everything, her marriage, her home, her business, her reputation, her freedom, her future. And she'd lost it all because she'd believed she was smarter, more desirable, more deserving than she actually was, because she'd thought she could take what wasn't hers without consequences. My mother's words came back to me. Cut out the rot, and everything else can grow. Jessica had been the rot. We'd cut her out cleanly, cauterized the wound, and moved forward. David had done the same, and now we were all thriving while she festered alone in the ruins of her own making. There was a certain poetry to it. Elena squeezed my hand, bringing me back to the present. Burgers are burning. I laughed and turned back to the grill, to the simple pleasure of a summer evening with my wife and my mother, to the life we'd defended and protected and rebuilt. Jessica had tried to destroy this. She'd failed. And in failing, she'd destroyed only herself. That was justice. Not the dramatic, explosive kind from movies, but the slow, inevitable kind where people who hurt others eventually face the reality they've created, where predators become isolated, where manipulators lose all credibility, where someone who spent years carefully crafting a false image watches that image shatter beyond any hope of repair. Jessica Hartley had wanted to win, to conquer, to prove her power by breaking up a marriage and collecting another trophy for her sick secret collection. Instead, she'd proven only one thing, that she was small, broken, and ultimately inconsequential to the people she'd tried to hurt. We won by simply continuing to exist, to love each other, to build our life together. And Jessica lost everything, exactly as she deserved.